Hey everyone, welcome to the first official video of Free Healing. My intention with this account is to post some shorter form content on a more regular basis. However, I am keen to do effectively a big download of my story so far and how I've got to where I am. I think to make it a bit more digestible, as this will be a longer video, I've split it across two posts. I think the first may be of interest to those who have hip pain themselves and may want to know a bit more about what sort of procedures are available. Maybe you've had hip operation or just surgery more generally. I want some pointers with regards to rehab and recovery, or maybe you've come into issues like I've experienced, and maybe I can share some ideas that I have that can perhaps progress your recovery in that regard. And then the second post will be one of a bit more of a positive tone, and that will cover my most recent phase of my healing journey, which is one of more holistic healing, which has really had positive benefits both for my mental and physical state. So yeah, I'll go ahead and start. So I think my story starts probably 3 years ago, and this is when I first started to get significant hip pain. I couldn't sit down for really any more than 20 minutes without starting to get quite a strong pinching sensation. I'd have to get up and walk around. I had to stop playing football and do strenuous sports. And even if I did a long walk the next morning or next day, I'd be particularly sore. So it was really starting to impact my life in a negative way. So I went to see an orthopedic surgeon and had some scans and tests done. And what this showed is that, well, I was actually diagnosed by the surgeon with a condition called FAI, standing for femoral acetabulum impingement. Now, some fancy words, but effectively what that is you have a deformity in the shape of your bones in the ball and socket. So let's say they're supposed to be nicely molded. Let's say my knuckle is a bit of a ridge that sticks out, is actually catching the cartilage and is causing a tear. So I had the bony deformity identified, as well as a small tear in my cartilage which cushions and lubricates the joint. And I had that diagnosis. So he did make me aware that surgery was an option, but at the time I wasn't too keen to explore that. So I went to see a local physio and tried some conventional rehab and strength and conditioning to try and ease my pain. Unfortunately, it didn't get any better, and in fact, it actually got worse. So I went back to see the surgeon, and having done some repeat scans, the tear had actually worsened as well. So from my perspective, I tried some conventional routes to improve the situation, but it was just getting worse. So I came to a decision in September 2022 to have the surgery. So, and this is when the fun starts. So from the surgeon's perspective, it all went well, but unfortunately I reacted really adversely to the surgery. I was just in tremendous pain. I had really severe swelling. I could barely even put my foot down. Of course, you're expected to have some pain after surgery, but it was more severe than we had expected. And importantly, from the get-go, and this is a key theme that we're going to be seeing throughout, is that I couldn't sit down because the pain was so severe. I was better when I was standing up in this position, but the moment I sat at a 90 degree plus the compression of my body weight, I just had the most severe pinching pain, like way worse than what I had pre-surgery. I felt heavy restriction around my hip. I felt like a lot of tension had formed around my hip joint and all the surrounding muscles. And also I felt like it felt really sticky. And this is another thing that is a common theme that I'm going to be discussing throughout. And I couldn't quite make sense of what that was. Like, as I stepped on it and released, it felt like I was almost prizing chewing gum. So I was on crutches for around 7 weeks, so it took me quite some time to get back onto my feet. Again, throughout this whole process, I wasn't able to sit down. As I kind of am on my beds at the bottom of the garden, I have to be reclined a little bit back and laying down because sitting down has just been too painful to achieve. I was seeing a local physio, but unfortunately my rehab was massively restricted by the level of pain that I had, and I think that may be a contributing factor to the issues that I do have now. And I think my recommendation to anyone who has hip surgery or just surgery in general is to make sure you have a physio lined up immediately, and just try to get yourself moving as much as possible to prevent any build-up of scar tissue or just muscular tension generally. So unfortunately I had to move back home because of this. So I do have a flat in London where I was living and working in London, but I've had to come back home to my parents in Leicester. And I tried working remotely for 2 or 3 months after the surgery, but quite quickly it became clear that going back full-time just wasn't feasible. And unfortunately had to go full-time sick from work, and I have been ever since. So reported these issues to the surgeon, and he sent me for some MRI scans to see if there's anything clear going wrong following the surgery. Unfortunately, they couldn't find anything. So the next steps was to have a steroid injection into different areas within the hip. So the first I had into the hip capsule, which is the ligaments which sort of surround the hip joint, had no relief to my pain whatsoever. And then suggestion was to have a second steroid injection, but into the joint itself, and again had no relief whatsoever. And this took me to around January 2023, so maybe about 3 or 4 months following the surgery. I started to introduce some gentle walking outside, and I think I got up to maybe around 20 minutes. And one day I went slightly too far, maybe went around 30 minutes. This was without my crutches. And the next day, my hip exploded in the most severe flare-up I could have imagined. The pain was just so sharp. It was like this intense stinging feeling. I could barely put my foot down, and effectively made me bedbound. I mean, I had to spend most of my time on my bed anyway because I couldn't sit down, but I really was truly bedbound at this point. And this put me back on crutches for 4, 5, 6 weeks. And I was just in a really bad way. And it became quite clear that the surgeon had kind of taken me as far as he could. But what he did was then to refer me to a specialist hip clinic within the orthopaedic practice at which he practiced. And this was like one of the top orthopaedic clinics in London, which I was thankfully able to get through my medical insurance at work. So I really was working with kind of like the best of the best. And within this hip clinic team, I was referred to 2 specialists. One was a specialist physiotherapy within hips, and then also a sports medicine practitioner. Now, they had believed that perhaps I had some level of scarring, which I suspected anyway, given the sort of restricted, sticky feeling, or I may have pain in my bone because I've had some of the bone trimmed down so it moulded better into the joint. So I worked with a physio to do a bit of a rehab plan. This focused on some specific stretching on my pain areas to try and break down some of the restricted tissue, as well as your expected sort of strength, mobility, etc. So I progressed with the rehab plan. I wasn't really making any progress. I kept experiencing minor flare-ups, so I'd be a couple of weeks off my crutches, a couple of weeks back on, still unable to sit down because the pain's so severe. I was sent for numerous scans and tests. I had a repeat MRI scan. I had an arthrogram where they inject dye into the joint as contrast. I had a CT scan which scans your skeleton and bones to assess for any potential like bone deposits that have been trimmed down or calcification in the tissue. Again, these showed nothing. And I was also trying treatments locally, so I had some massage therapy, laser therapy, acupuncture, and some of these at a very mild level reduced my pain somewhat, but wasn't fundamentally addressing the issue or my severe levels of pain. So eventually, given this continual pattern of flaring up, no real progress, I came to the decision in July 2023, so last year, to have repeat surgery. Now, the purpose of this surgery was effectively to explore within the joint to see if there was anything obviously defective or wrong that would be contributing to the levels of pain that wasn't showing on all of the scans and tests that I had, because scans don't always show everything, and the best way, unfortunately, is to cut you back open, and get a camera in there to have a very clear view of what's going on. The two things that the surgeon did report was that on one of the portholes, so they make 2 incisions into the joint, one of the entry points was more restricted, which suggests that there's densification of the tissue or scar tissue of some form. And the second thing that he did was release adhesions inside the joint. So as a result of my incisions in the first surgery, some of the soft tissue had kind of adhered to the bone and stuck to it. So he released that and cut that through with the aim of hopefully relieving my pain. Unfortunately, that didn't relieve any of my pain in the immediacy, but one clear thing that I did notice is that my pain response and swelling response from that second surgery was nothing close to what it was in the first surgery. I could put my foot down easily. I remember on the first surgery, I was in so much pain I couldn't make the toilet, so I had to be given a bottle to urinate in, as embarrassing as that was. I didn't need that for the second surgery. I was walking back and forth from the toilet fine. And it just wasn't close to levels of pain. So something clearly happened in that first surgery, something that the surgeon did, or just my biology reacting adversely to the trauma of surgery. I don't know. And I don't think I'll ever know. And I think at this point it's not particularly important. I just need to resolve my issues. I at this point was already working with the specialist hip clinic team, so I had a specialist physio to work with to rehabilitate me from the second surgery. I was able to get back on my feet much quicker. I think I was only 3 weeks rather than the 7 weeks of the first surgery. I bought all sorts of kit in preparation. I bought one of those sleeves that you see the footballers wear on their legs to ice and to reduce the swelling and inflammation. I bought this sort of motor that I put my leg in, and it sort of automatically slowly moves my leg up and down just to promote some movement and prevent any further scarring. But unfortunately, I just didn't really have any major benefits. I still had that significant pinch in pain. I couldn't sit down. And despite me building some more tolerance on my feet, I still just couldn't lose that feeling of stickiness in my hip, the pain that came with it, the sort of feeling of tension around the joint. And the pain was no worse, but equally as severe as a result of that second surgery. So I started to sort of explore more treatment methods. So I had shockwave therapy, which sends sound waves into the tissue, sends blood to the area, which is supposed to be quite good at breaking down scar tissue and enhancing repair and promoting repair. I had some more acupuncture, and that did provide some temporary relief. It was like I could feel the sticky area of my hip start to open up, and with that comes some pain relief. But then very quickly it would feel like it would just contract back down. And I had the same sort of experience with stretching. I do some stretching and soft tissue work, kind of like roller and ball work. I can get some temporary relief of the tension and pain, but for whatever reason it just kept kind of sticking back down, and I was not able to get any long-term benefit. I had more scans with this specialist clinic. I had an MRI scan again, another arthrogram, just to see if there's any change from the first surgery. I had all sorts of medication, different painkillers, different anti-inflammatories. I even had medication to target potential nerve damage. I had a scan of my lower back to see if there's any potential damage to any of the major nerves in the spinal cord. I even had a nerve conduction test just to see if there was any poor responses to nerve impulses and reactions, and nothing was showing. So one thing that I did start to notice at this point is that the sticky feeling that I had in my hip, it kind of extended all the way along my left lateral chain, and it went down my leg, and I even felt like stickiness and restriction in my toes in my left foot, and also kind of coming up to my rib cage on my left hand side, which I found a bit peculiar. And one thing that I did start to notice is that if I was to kind of get my skin on my rib cage and start to slowly pull up, I could feel the stickiness in my hip start to like slowly untangle, and with that comes a relief